afternoon and welcome to How Should Instructors Think About ChatGPT? Our presenter today is Abigua, Interim Associate Dean of Undergraduate Programs and Associate Professor of Marketing with the Darla Moore School of Business. Abi, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Aisha. Welcome all. It's great to see everyone, and thank you for spending some time with me this afternoon. I'd like to share my thoughts about ChatGPT, and I'm going to try and ensure I finish a bit early so that I can take questions from everyone. So I may request to hold questions for the end, but I'm going to try and finish early so that we can take questions. Okay, so with that said, we're going to get started talking about ChatGPT. I'll start by saying, look, ChatGPT is an interesting software. It's galloped to 1 million users really, really fast. It's become really popular in a very small period of time. So clearly, this is something that we haven't seen before. Let's talk a bit about what it is. It's a large language model built by OpenAI. I'll tell you what it can do. It can respond in human-like forms. You ask it a question, it'll give you a human-like response. It's pretty good at language processing, writing, editing. It can generate content. So it can do a fair number of things. It can also help you with small role plays. Like you can say, how would someone respond? It'll give you a response. But we should be careful to understand that there are limitations of ChatGPT. This is not a huge advance. I'll tell you what it can't do. It cannot replace humans. It doesn't fully understand all responses. I gave it my exam. It's a grade C student. It answered the easy questions, couldn't do the hard questions. It's pretty bad at complex tasks. It's pretty bad at creativity. So clearly there are limitations with ChatGPT. And of course, a big one is because it's trained on certain data, anything that's happened after that date, it doesn't know anything about. So there are limitations on ChatGPT. So to understand why we are talking about ChatGPT, the first thing is, look, ChatGPT is in our classroom, right? Students are using it. Professors are nervous about it. You've seen all these things that I've put up on the screen. And clearly that's why we're talking about it, because it's here. So what are we going to do about it? So I decided to ask two groups of people some opinions about ChatGPT. The first thing I did was ask USC students, so rounded up 130 students roughly, and asked them some questions about ChatGPT. Have they ever used it? Do they have any knowledge about it? And you can see on a 1 to 5 scale, relatively less knowledge, relatively less usage. They kind of know about it, but not that much. What's their opinion? Their opinion is actually fairly positive. Relatively speaking, it's fairly positive. They may not know about it, but they have a positive opinion. Next, I asked them to list down something they could use ChatGPT for in their schoolwork. And then I said, against that, do you think this is something that is allowed as per university policy? So they could all come up with things that they do with ChatGPT where they struggled with, was it allowed? So about 40% could state whether this would be allowed or not. So if you look at the screen in front of you, you'll see 3 columns. The column to the left is things they were doing with ChatGPT that they thought they wouldn't get into trouble with. So, get info about a certain topic, you don't know about it. Okay, that's fine. It's like Google in that sense. Things on the right, definitely non-compliant. You have to write an essay, tell ChatGPT to write it for you. And that they were clear is not compliant. The middle stuff, that's where they struggled. So what if you wrote an essay, but gave it to ChatGPT and said, correct all my writing and make my writing look good? You kind of did it, but is that right? So they were struggling. So, students, they haven't used it much. They have a reasonably positive opinion. And they're struggling with, is it allowed, not allowed? That's from the student's point of view. And how about professors? So I reached out to all of you and I appreciate everyone who filled up responses. So yesterday in the evening, I drew a line and whatever responses had come in by then, I took a crack at analyzing the data. So this is responses from the folks in this room. And I appreciate everyone who filled up my survey. And here's what you said. Similar to students, not everybody knows a lot. People don't know that much about ChatGPT. So if you look at the left-hand side of this PowerPoint, how knowledgeable are you about ChatGPT? You can see it's like a 2.4, right? You don't know that much. I get that. On the other hand, your view is fairly positive. Like if you look at the right-hand side of the PowerPoint, what's your opinion? It's leaning positive, right? It's significantly positive. The next set of questions asked was, are you using ChatGPT for assignments? Here, there's no clear response, right? On a 1 to 7 scale, responses were roughly down the middle. Would you want to ban ChatGPT? Well, on average, the folks in this room were not going to ban ChatGPT. That's the sentiment of the people in the room, right? I think the most interesting question was the last one. How do you see ChatGPT evolving, at least in the academic space? So here, 1 is like it's going to be banned, 7 is like it's going to be actively used. And there wasn't a clear response. It's not significantly different from the midpoint, right? And here are some of your free format responses, because I also requested people to provide some kind of justification. And here's what you said, and this sets up this presentation. On the top of the slide, some people thought it's going to be actively used. So there were comments like, look, it's going to be impossible to ban. We may as well use it. Or somebody said, look, it's going to be incorporated all the tools that are going to be used out there. So we may as well teach our students how to use it. On the other, at the bottom, you can see people say, I don't think faculty are going to use it in their class. Or there's going to be some kind of policy coming out that's going to probably not allow ChatGPT, and if you use it, it'll be banned. And then there were folks in the middle who weren't quite sure. I can see it going either way. It's hard to know exactly what will happen. And this sets up the paper, right? This sets up this presentation. You can see some folks are saying, I think it'll be used a lot. Some folks are saying, I think it's going to be banned. And folks in the middle saying, I'm not sure. So I'm going to use this as a setup for this presentation, right? And so I'm arguing there are two schools of thought, broadly speaking. One is ChatGPT should be banned. Nobody should use it. This is it. On the other hand, some folks want to embrace ChatGPT and they want ChatGPT to work with students. And overall, they think that will enhance student experience. These are very contrasting opinions. We are scientists, so the way we look at it is, rather than say whether it should be banned or be used, it's better to think about when should it be banned and when should it be used. So that's the framework I'm using for setting up this discussion. So let's talk about the first one. In which cases does ChatGPT probably need to be restricted in some way? Or is it likely to cause some problem in some way? And here's my thinking on this, right? And this is an extreme case just to set up this example. So here's the argument of ChatGPT. It's a shortcut for essays and other writing assignments. And one challenge is you can't figure out if the student used ChatGPT or not. And I'll give you an example. Imagine some instructor teaching students basic English composition. Can you write a good essay? Can you write an introduction? Can you write a body? And can you draw some conclusions? Can I just teach you to write a good essay? Just write properly. Well, ChatGPT does a great job with that. So I gave ChatGPT an essay to write. I said, please write a 100-word essay on why somebody should study in University of South Carolina. They wrote something. Look, it's a pretty good essay, right? It's reasonably good. And although it's not on your slide, I'll tell you what it is. They looked at ChatGPT and they asked ChatGPT to respond to essays from grade 4 to I think grade 12. And ChatGPT was a pretty good B student. The essays coming out of ChatGPT pretty much reflected what a B student was providing, right? And so if your job is to teach people how to write and you give them take-home assignments, I think students are going to say, great, I'm going to go to ChatGPT, give them the question, they'll give me a pretty good response, I'll get a B. So now what can you do? I saw an interesting comment from my colleague Leslie, who said ChatGPT hasn't fully updated to the USC moniker. It uses the old U of SC. And that's because it's only got memory till 2021. It doesn't know anything after 2021, right? That's why it does that. Okay, so what do you do? Like, what are you going to do if you're someone teaching basic English writing and you've got this ChatGPT floating around? Well, there are a couple of things you could do in-class exams. Now, it's not easy to do. You have to figure out how to do it. But you could do that. Fine. Option one. In some cases, and maybe not for writing, but for other topics that have this problem, you could do an oral exam. Or you could ban it. Let's talk about banning. Everyone thinks it's easy to ban ChatGPT. So the way this would work is you'd get a software like GPT-0, and you'd basically take an essay a student has sent you, and you'd plug into GPT-0 and say, look, did a student cheat? What it comes back is with a probability score. It'll come back with a score saying, I think there's a 75% chance this came from ChatGPT. Okay, great. Problem one, if you have to prosecute a student, it's very difficult saying, I think there's a 75% chance you cheated. Like there's a 25% chance you were wrong. I mean, what do you do with that? But it gets more interesting. Here are some ways to beat GPT-0. And I've tried all of these, it works. So imagine you have an essay and you're a student. So imagine I'm a student, I've decided to cheat. So I go to ChatGPT, I ask it to give me an essay but then I'm worried about being caught. So I plug into GPT-0 and see the score is the 75% likelihood that I've cheated. So what I do is I then go back to that essay and I start editing. Not every sentence, but maybe every third sentence, add some unique words. Or if there are 10 paragraphs, I rewrite 2 paragraphs. I plug it back into GPT-0 and then the score comes down. You can even take it one step further. You can take the same essay, put it back into ChatGPT and say, look, I put your essay through GPT-0 and it says there's a high probability I cheated. You tweak the essay to reduce that score and ChatGPT will iterate. So, this is a real problem if you're someone who wants to ban it. But how are you going to catch someone when they can do all these things to kind of get that score reduced to a level where you can say, well, I think you cheated, but I'm not sure, right? So unless you are down to the honor code and honesty, it's not clear how this is to be policed. So basically comes down to, for certain areas, ChatGPT is a problem. If I'll give an example, you're in business communication or you're in some writing oriented program, it's a real problem. So I think those folks will say, let's find ways to restrict ChatGPT, and that could mean doing things like more in-class stuff, etc. So that's one extreme position. Let me take a second position. This is, when should you embrace ChatGPT, right? So up till now, I've talked about when is ChatGPT a problem. And so far, what I've said is if you're teaching some kind of course that involves writing, you're teaching people just how to write, not content. It's a problem. But when should you embrace ChatGPT? Well, let's look at some examples. So, some folks will say it's a tool. And we all remember the good old days when people protested against calculus. So maybe it's a tool. And I see a couple of questions, and I will come to some of these as I work through this. So ACSB, this is the entity that regulates business schools, right? So here's an article I got from the ACSB website, right? This says we should treat ChatGPT as some kind of teammate. So think of it as, this is ACSB, these guys regulate business schools. And one article out here is saying, as a student progresses through the system, we should think of ChatGPT as a teammate working with the student to enhance the student's knowledge as it works through the system. That's a very interesting point of view. It's very different from the previous point of view. This says ChatGPT has a real role in the education system, and so it should be a teammate. Why is it saying this? Here are some reasons why instructors may want to adopt ChatGPT, and I will confess I have, right? So first is it enhances learning, right? Every assignment has what I call simple things and complex things. This takes away some of the simple things so they have time to focus on the more complex things. So I'm on the left-hand side of this page, right? How it enhances learning. There's also minimal friction. In the sense, it's really easy to learn how to use. Let's come to the right-hand side of the page, right? It actually prepares students for the future. Like I absolutely promise you, companies out there are going to use ChatGPT for work. If we are sending students into the workplace and they have to hit the ground running on day one, if a company is using ChatGPT, when the student shows up, they should know how to use ChatGPT. It's a tool like Excel. The second point is, while I've said ChatGPT is easy, there are ways to make the best use of ChatGPT, and that requires you to learn how to ask ChatGPT the right question. So if I'm asking it to write an essay, I can say write an essay on X, it'll give me some essay. But if I really want to get a good essay out of it, there's an art to asking the right questions from ChatGPT. You give it a word limit, you tell it what style to write in, you give it some parameters of what you're looking for, and it'll come back with a pretty good response, right? And so ChatGPT can be really helpful. It helps the learning experience. Companies are doing it. So at least in some disciplines, if we're sending students out there and we care about their employability, we want them to actually know how to use ChatGPT when they show up on the company on day one, right? Here's a Harvard Business Review article on how ChatGPT can be used in sales. Now, sales is a big business function in many firms, and ChatGPT can do a variety of things in sales. It can give you a script. It can list down, here are the 3 things you should talk about when you're talking about a certain kind of product. It can also help you prepare. So for example, I asked ChatGPT to basically say, I am going to go ask an alum of South Carolina that I want some money, right? What should my sales pitch be? And ChatGPT gave me 4 points. Now, is it perfect? No, but it's a starting point. Then the next thing I did was ask ChatGPT again that, look, I go to this alum and I've done a sales pitch. Now, what are the objections that alum could have that I don't want to give you money, right? And so in this case, ChatGPT actually said, here are the 4 or 5 objections somebody could give. The objections are pretty good. Like you can actually use it for role plays. The other example I give is from the business school. We have these sales competitions where students negotiate against people working in companies, and there's a prize for the best student. Well, all our students, they basically go to ChatGPT and they say, I'm going to negotiate with someone on, I want to sell them steel at this price. I want a high price, clearly. That person wants to clearly buy it at the lowest price. What should my sales pitch be? And ChatGPT gives you an initial response. Then you fine tune it. And a lot of people said they found it very, very helpful using ChatGPT to kind of anticipate what kind of objection should come. They asked ChatGPT, play the role of this person, this mindset, and they got pretty good responses. So ChatGPT can be really helpful. Next, I rounded up 12 marketing professors. I'm in marketing, so that's where I went to first, but it would work even if you found professors in other parts of business. And I said, tell me how marketers use ChatGPT, right? And so here are the things they said. You can use ChatGPT for social media content. Imagine you have a social media intern and you said, look, I need my blogs to be populated at all times. It'll give you some blogs, some basic blogs, some information. Can you respond to emails? Sure, you can, right? And there's some way you can respond to emails. Can you set up sales messages? Yes, you can. Can you give it certain product descriptions? You write a basic product description. Can they improve on it? Yes, it can. So ChatGPT can be used in a variety of ways in businesses. So here are some assignments that we can give. And I've given some of these assignments. Create an ad copy. You've got this widget. Create an ad for this widget. What's your tagline? What's your next 2 lines, etc. Here's an email you've got from a customer. Create a first response to that. ChatGPT will give it to you. You can then tweak it. So it gives you a good first draft. We've talked about sales pitch, sales objections. That's a pretty good use for ChatGPT. Initial market research. Recently, there's a new paper that came out saying you can test how it would react to certain new products by asking ChatGPT, and the responses are pretty good for a certain kind of customer segment, right? So there are ways to use ChatGPT. You can actually give these assignments. It trains students how to use the tool. It gets them thinking about different ways it can be used in business. It's actually pretty interesting, right? So, up till now, we've talked about 2 broad things. We've talked about when is ChatGPT not so helpful? When is ChatGPT helpful? Not so helpful is we're teaching basic stuff like how to write. Like you want somebody to be able to write something. And if they've never written something in their life, they've only gone to ChatGPT, it's not going to be helpful. And look, all of us who've gone through those quantitative classes in their PhD know what happened. I mean, today we use SPSS, SAS, etc., etc. But there is some quant professor somewhere in your PhD who would have said, for one class, we are going to calculate everything by hand so that all of you know what you're doing. Then later on, by all means, use SAS, SPSS, whatever you use. But for some things, I want you to do it for hand just to be sure you know what to do. For those kind of areas where you're learning how to write, etc., ChatGPT is not very helpful. And there the problem is that if you give homework assignments, I think students will use it. And therefore, that's a real challenge. And therefore, what can you do? And, I've talked about some things you can do, but I think if either we rely on the honor system that, don't use it, but catching someone and catching them in a way that you can actually take them to some, whatever that entity is where you take them and say the student cheated. And I'm very, very sure they cheated. I think that is going to be especially hard, given that all you get is a probability score, right? On the other hand, for some disciplines, I think ChatGPT is great. Business is going to use it. So you're going to say our students need to know how to use it. And therefore, we are going to have these assignments in class the way we ensure that everybody knows how to use Excel because company uses Excel. Same way we ask a set of folks maybe doing data, like one of the people here is Leslie. She trains people on things like Tableau and R. Why? Because companies use it. So students should know how to use it before they go out into companies, right? And so if you look at it that way, right, then ChatGPT is something we should be teaching in our classes. We should be saying companies are going to use it, so we're going to show you how to use it. So here's my kind of overall summary, right? And I'm going to try and close this in about 5 minutes so that we have lots of time for questions. So I think the first thing we look at when you look at ChatGPT is what am I doing in my class, right? So if I look at the top half of this slide, if your class is about English composition, hypothetically, I've taken an extreme example. Your job is to ensure that this is a business communication class or English composition class. You want to ensure that if somebody comes into your class, when they finish, they know how to write a basic essay from scratch. They know what an introduction is and how to make a good introduction. They know what an ending is and how to write a good ending. They know what a body of an essay is and what should be there. If that is what you're doing, then maybe ChatGPT is not your friend. If you come to the other extreme end, which is, say, a marketing discipline, well, we know many companies are going to use ChatGPT, right? It's a great tool. And so those folks should embrace ChatGPT. Now, what does that mean, right? What does it mean to sort of shy away from ChatGPT or to embrace it? Let's take the top half of the page. You're teaching basic English composition or you're teaching business written communication. Well, people should know how to write, right? In which case you're kind of stuck. Right now, here's homework. Go write an essay, 5 pages, send it back to me. It's a Word document, whatever. Well, if you do that, I think students will say, great, thank you very much. Plug into ChatGPT. They'll give you a very nice essay. They'll come back. They'll do very well, right? And so what do you do? Well, I think in that case, folks should think about modifying some of the exams, some of the assignments. So the way, when I was doing my PhD, yes, we all learned how to use SAS and SPSS and all that. There were professors who would say, okay, great, you know how to use SAS and SPSS, I understand that. But for this one class, I'm not going to give you a big data set. Maybe I'll give you just 20 observations. Just do everything by hand. Calculate variance by hand, calculate mean, you know, show me the difference between two groups, calculating everything by hand so that I know what you're doing. And I think that's the framework folks would have to do. So either change your exam format that they are either writing it in class or create some kind of writing lab where they write on machines that don't have internet access, something like that. But if it's just left to the honor code, I think there would be a problem. So I think for the folks who are offering those kind of classes, ChatGPT is a problem. It's a real problem, right? And I'm not quite sure how to proceed because this modify exam is not easy. When you're trying to get people in class and cutting out internet access, it's not so straightforward to implement. Let's talk about the second part of the page. Now, that's much easier. If you are in a discipline where people at the back end are using ChatGPT and you want to train students that they're ready on day one to use it, you know, then what do you do? Well, then you embrace ChatGPT. You say, this is my friend, and I'm going to position ChatGPT as a teammate to the student along their learning journey. And you will tell the student the way you learn Excel and Word, so that when you're in the workforce on day one, if somebody says, can you use Excel? And you say, no, well, you're not very helpful. The same way, some of the more quantitative disciplines like what Leslie teaches, they walk in saying, I can do Tableau and I can do R and I've done assignments on this. That's very helpful to a firm, right? You're using the software that they use. In that case, I think you need to do two things. Let's take the stuff in green. There, ChatGPT is your friend. You're going to create a series of assignments that require the use of ChatGPT that mimic what they would do post the university. And you would ensure that they know how to use ChatGPT well. Not just know how to use, but use it well. Do you know the right prompts to ask? If you wanted to create an ad copy for you, do you know how to actually create it? Have you actually done it? Have you tested it and seen whether it performs well or not? Right? And so you would create these assignments so that they're ready to use ChatGPT the way we, train them in Excel. That you should be able to do all kinds of things in Excel, the same way you should be able to use ChatGPT. The stuff in red is interesting. There are some concepts in marketing for which we may need to modify exams. I'll give you an example. Let's imagine I'm teaching folks the basics of marketing, a basic marketing plan. And everybody should know that they should be able to do a situation analysis. From there, once you've done that, you say, now I've decided after looking at the situation, here are my core group of customers I'm going to go after, and this is what I'm going to say to them. and then I'm going to create some kind of marketing mix to support that. Well, they need to know what a marketing mix is. They can't show up and say, never heard that word. They can't show up and say, I don't know what positioning. So if I want to test those concepts, that I'm going to test in class, where you don't have access to a computer. I may test it in different ways. I could ask it verbally. I could use a multiple choice in class. But there are some things that I expect you to know without saying, hang on, I need to go check ChatGPT. For that, I think one will have to modify concepts. Now, I saw some interesting questions here, and I'll respond to this when it comes to exams. Somebody said, can it respond to complex questions? So I'll give you an example, right? If you give it a complex question, I gave it my exam, right? So I teach a very large class, 300-400 people, and it's a multiple choice exam. Some are easy, some are hard. ChatGPT was a great like B or C student. It got all the easy questions right. The more difficult questions, most of it got wrong. So can it do complex stuff? Probably not. I'll give an example of what's a simple question. A simple question is, what is positioning? Give 4 definitions. ChatGPT will probably get that question right. What will it not get right? What if my question is, there's something called decoy effect. Now, what we want to do is use decoy effect. Here's a situation of somebody trying to sell some product. Which of these 4 is a good example of how the decoy effect should be used? There it breaks down completely, right? I do see a question. I want to quickly respond to that. So there's something around using faculty to use ChatGPT to write publications. So here I've focused on how ChatGPT should be used in the classroom. Quickly on this, a lot of faculty do use ChatGPT. At the end of this, if we have time, I'd love to talk about how faculty can use. And I really think faculty should use. It does a bunch of really good things. And a lot of journals are today having disclaimers at the end that if you used it, here's how you should acknowledge that you've used it. I'm happy to come back to that, although I do note the focus of this was much more on how it should be used in the classroom. But this is an important point. I'd love to come back to that. It's 4 o'clock. I promised I'd keep some time at the end for questions. Please put in the chat. I will respond, but I'm happy to take any questions because I think this is probably the most important part of this session. And I'm open to any kind of question on ChatGPT in the classroom. And I will pivot back at the end if we have time on how to use it for your research and writing. So if there are any questions, happy to take it. Sure. So Rosabelle, I'm going to go back. Tell me when you see the slide. This one. Okay. So this one relates to class assignments you can give with ChatGPT. So I have a friend who's actually piloting a class where the class basically has ChatGPT and something called DALL-E, D-A-L-L-E, which does the same thing with images integrated into the class. And these are standard assignments. So you give them a product and say, come up with good ad copy to introduce the product to this kind of audience. And you can do it on your own, or you can go to ChatGPT, explain the product and say, come up with like 10 examples. Look, it may not give you the right answer. What it does is it triggers off different ideas because it's going to give you 10 answers going in different directions. And you'll say, I don't like ABC. I really like DEF. Let me now probe that deeper. That's the method of ChatGPT. It gets you started. I'm not sure if I responded to your question, but those are the typical class assignments one would give, right? Email responses. Somebody's written to you saying, you gave me a quote. I think the price is slightly high. I note you're offering faster delivery, but I still think the price is high. How do you respond to that? Again, give it to ChatGPT to give you 3 responses. Nabil's asked a question that if we ask for it in specific assignments, we can ask for a copy. So that's actually a fair point. So he's talking about SAS code. One of the things that's not here is I remember talking to some professor in computer science, and what the professor would do is say, ask ChatGPT to give you the code and then improve on it. Now, will students always tell you what ChatGPT did? I don't know. You could ask for that. But definitely what ChatGPT gives you is a skeleton, which you can then improve of. So it's a fair point, Nabil. You could ask for that. Maybe they'll do it. You could. It's very reasonable to say, here's your essay, put it to ChatGPT, or let ChatGPT give you a first essay response, submit that, and now in your second submission, tell me how you improved on that. What you may not know is whether the person did the second submission themselves, or whether they went back to ChatGPT and said, you wrote this essay for me 2 days ago, now improve on it on the following points. You may not know that, but you can definitely request for it. It's an interesting suggestion. Happy to take any other question in the classroom. I have noted that I do want to leave some time at the end about how it can be used for research. So, Courtney, I don't know the specific case. I do know that I got access pretty much instantaneously. And one of the things that I really want to do is use my research budget to get access to ChatGPT, the sort of premium version, because I think that's $20 a month well spent. So I actually plan to sign up for the ChatGPT premium version to ensure I get it. One thing I do know that ChatGPT is looking at an institutional access where researchers in the school get access for the premium version. I haven't seen that come through, but that's something I would push for in my school. I definitely plan to in my own school, saying I think we should get an institutional license. So the premium version, here's the benefit, right? Imagine you have ChatGPT and there's some kind of server, right, maintaining that. And let's assume a million folks are trying to access it. Well, somebody's got to put some priority on it, right? And so what the premium version does is it puts you to the front of the queue. That's what it means. I see something from Joseph Hall, and he's made a comment, and I think that's fair, right? Like I said, it's here and we should adapt. And for the kind of stuff where people are actually doing learning to write, the adaptation may mean certain kinds of exams that are different to what we are using. But I think that's a very fair point, Joseph. That's an interesting thing that it's here. We need to adapt to it. And if it means we are going to be doing stuff in the classroom, that's what it is. Okay, so Leslie said for $20 a month, you can post assignment questions and check and get a real human created solution. It's a fair point, right? You can. And Leslie, if we are in the domain, so I'll try and respond to this way, right? In marketing, for example, if I give people a question and they get a human to give you a solution, that human better be really good. So I'm going to give the person some kind of table saying, here's some information on brands and which should be a challenger brand. I mean, if you've got a human at the other end, that's pretty good. Good luck to you, right? And that's why I did have in my little case at the bottom that we may need to modify exam and testing certain concepts. But I think for ad copy, I think it's totally reasonable. Imagine you're someone creating ad copy. Well, what do we do when we create ad copy? Sometimes we go to ChatGPT and may give you an answer. But before ChatGPT, what did we do? We could crowdsource it. We could ask our friends. And that's all legit, right? You're creating ad copy. I mean, you're saying, here's a product. What's my best ad? And everyone's got their own networks. So, it's a similar concept. Will ChatGPT give you the right answer? No. What it does, it says, here are 10 different ways you can go. I'm willing to bet 3 of them you would have never thought of. And then you say, great, this gives me a starting point. Let me go look at it like that. So I think that's the benefit of ChatGPT. I don't think it's going to give you the right answer. I think what I'll do is say, here we are. So Elliot's asked a question, will it be updated? It's going to be updated, right? Will it always be a year behind? I don't know. But it has to be given a whole lot of information, and then trained on it. That's not so easy, right? But yes, it will be updated. It may just be running a bit behind. Now, I promise you, every major software firm is trying to find some way to integrate ChatGPT with their tools. So to me, the killer application is something like what Bloomberg is trying to do. What Bloomberg is trying to do is get ChatGPT and train it on financial data and try to ensure it's always reasonably up to date to what's being trained. And then it's going to offer that to its premium clients. That will be a killer application if they can get to work. But that's what, say, Bloomberg is trying to do. I mean, Terry's asked an interesting question. And to the extent you're teaching the second part, which is thinking processes that undergird writing, I think that one, if you just give people a homework assignment, they may be tempted to plug into ChatGPT. But if they are in class, then that's their true output and they're learning how to undergird writing. Once they've learned that, by all means, if they go ahead and use ChatGPT, get an initial draft and improve it, fine. But I think if you're teaching them the basic process, the only way to teach that is not let them use ChatGPT on day one. I think that would be hard. Let me talk a bit about research because, for many of us, that's our lifeblood. Can ChatGPT be used in research? Absolutely, 100%. I'll give you an example. One of my friends was brainstorming with his co-authors. They were stuck somewhere. They were trying to run some project. And so what they did was they brainstormed and they recorded their entire conversation. And then they got a transcript to ChatGPT. And ChatGPT actually gave them a summary. That was helpful. In some other case, my friend ran a study that was between subjects. So, two groups of people, he got a result. He wasn't able to get it when it was a within subject design, where the same subject would do a response on two items. He plugged into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT gave him some ideas about here's how to think about changing your stimuli, etc. Not saying he adopted it, but he got like 10 options, and then he said, oh, here are two things I can pursue. Can it be used in research? Absolutely. And as a researcher, you are responsible for the content you submit. So lot of like Elsevier, etc., they've come out with ways to actually acknowledge that you use ChatGPT, but you have to say, I take responsibility for everything here. So I used it as an aid. That's all I used it for. And you move on. I think we are nearing the end. I appreciate everybody who came here and spending some time. It was great interacting with everyone. If you have seen my email address, I'm happy to engage with anyone on this. If there's any way I can help, please do reach out. And I totally appreciate helping me out. There's a question from Rosabelle. Aid for proofreading. Yes, 100%. I'll give you an example. If I have a student, a PhD student, maybe English is not their first language, it's not very good, I will always say, whatever you write, please plug into ChatGPT and write there. Please improve my grammar. I've actually done this. I took a paragraph I wrote myself, made 5 errors, put it in ChatGPT and said, I make spelling errors and grammar errors, please correct. It does a pretty good job, right? So the way you'd use Grammarly or something like that, using this is pretty good. It gives you output you can copy and paste back. So proofreading and checking for grammar, yeah, Joseph Hall, if you're a faculty member and you want to write a basic letter of recommendation, it's really good. It's really good. Like I agree with Joseph 100%. Just take someone's CV, plug it in. It'll give you a first draft. You can then edit it, but it gives you a first draft letter of recommendation. 100%, no question. So I appreciate everybody who came. Thank you so much for your time. I know everyone has constraints on their time. It was great to engage on this. This is probably the start of the discussion, not the end. Thank you very much to all. And special thanks to Aisha. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Abby, as well. And please complete the evaluation. I included it in the chat. I'll include it once again. We appreciate your feedback, and I hope that you all have a good rest of your day.